Okay, the next step is competition. Who else is solving this problem? So if we go back to that question of whose problem is this, do they know they have a problem, and how are they solving it? Let's dive into that, how they're solving it. Right? So we'll assume one of three things is usually happening. Either they're purchasing a solution from some other company, and you're going to claim, we'll talk about uniqueness in a moment, you're going to claim that what you're doing is better. Or they solve this problem, they know it exists, they solve the problem, and they spin their own solution. Spreadsheets, word processing documents, paper, somehow they solve this problem on their own. Right? What you need to understand in those cases is, what does it cost them to do that? How complicated is it for them to do that? Why are they solving this problem on their own? Why are they not finding a solution out there in the market? Right? Your competition can be your own customers. You have to worry about that as well. But the third one is the most important. The third one is they don't solve the problem. So sometimes your competition is nothing. Sometimes your competition is there is no solution in the market, or there are solutions that no one is buying in the market. In all those cases, you need to understand why customers are not buying a solution. And if it's because the existing one's too expensive, that might send you back to the pricing model. Maybe you need to be in the low end of that market. Or what may be that they're missing one or two features, one or two benefits that the competition doesn't have. You go there, you'll discover maybe there's something you can do that's slightly different or slightly better or in a different manner, or just a better sales pitch. There's lots of reasons why customers are not buying some other solution. There's a lot of reasons customers will switch from one potential solution to the other. You need to spend some time and understand how customers are solving the problem today. Now this again can take you weeks or months, sometimes years, and make as many notes as you can. The result of this inside, as you do this, should be notebooks full of notes, maybe as URLs out to websites so that you can make a list of all the potential customers. And the way you need to boil this down comes into two forms. So at some point, you're going to need to talk to someone else and explain to them why you're better and how you're different. And this shows up in three different places. Again, as you try and recruit team members into your team, you're going to have to explain why your company is going to win. Secondly, if you go out to investors and talk to them, they want to know who else is in this market, right? Who are you competing against? And thirdly, when you make your sales pitch, if there are named competitors, you're going to want to name them and you're going to want to show why you're better. And so in these cases, in all three cases, you want to be able to summarize all this research you do on the competition in a minute or two, right? 5 at the most, very short amount of time. And so one form this takes very commonly is called a competitive matrix. So here's a competitive matrix for you to look at. It is a grid where your company is listed in the leftmost column. No reason for that. That's just where it's expected to be found by people who see these all the time. So just stick with that convention. Your company is listed in the leftmost column. This is Concrete Flywheel, which is one of the case studies in the Next Step books. And then in a series of rows, you're going to put 5 or 6 or 7 benefits on, or features, but generally benefits on why your company is better than the competition. I'll explain the bottom ones in a second. And then in the other columns, you're going to list either named competitors, and here are 3 named competitors, or an entire category. You can compete against a category of solutions and just say, in this case, R&D solutions. There's a bunch of solutions to the problem of storing electricity that are really sitting in R&D facilities in university projects. They're not out there as named up and running companies. So we're going to just lump them into one whole column. Then what you do for each of these benefits is you just fill in, yes, the company does this or not. And what you want to do to make this believable is to have benefits up there that your company doesn't do. And so this is one of the keys. We'll call it a trick. If you just list five things and your company does all 5 and your competitors don't, people don't believe that. People think you've just picked those 5 because those are 5 that came to mind, and they dismiss the whole analysis. So what you want to do to be believable is to have at least one on the bottom that you don't do at all. And worst case is you have some on the bottom that you aspire to do. In this case, there's two on the bottom. One is really the fourth one repeated, which is it's high tech versus low tech. And the bottom is to show that this is a solution that doesn't need government loans to work out. Beacon being a competitor that's in fact bankrupt now, that got a large government loan. Now, you can make this a slightly more complicated. So in the first example, they were just check boxes or not. So it's really yes or no. In the second example, there are two sizes of check marks. So the way that's interpreted is, yes, this company does this and does it well, or yes, it does it, but it doesn't do it really well, or it doesn't do it at all. And you could potentially have more, you can have ratings in each of these, but what I find is that small and large and not is sufficient. 3 levels is sufficient. If you really want to push it, here's a third example that uses Harvey balls. That's what they're called. And it can be filled and half filled and empty, or you can go all out like Consumer Reports and have 16 different levels. It gets way too complicated. One fun way I've seen to do this, which I don't have a picture of, is to use the logos. So you can use, if it's a concrete flywheel, here we could have a chunk of concrete, or we could have a flywheel, or if you're doing something, I have seen examples where we used drops of blood for a company that had to do with blood donation, and we used flowers for companies that had to do with flowers. You can make it more fun. In the end, it's really just telling the story of which of your competitors do what. And then the next trick is that when you present this, we'll talk about that in pitching, you don't talk about the whole thing. You don't talk about every cell. You don't walk through every column and every row. You just pick 3 highlights. You pick 3 stories to tell about why you are doing something better than one of the competitors here or one of the categories here, and leave it at that. And that then leaves the impression with the person you're pitching to that there's a huge amount of knowledge that went into this presentation, which should be true. You should have pages and pages of notes that you boil down into this competitive matrix. But you don't talk about all those notes. You simply talk about 3 stories that highlight your differences. Now, there's one other way to display this information, to display this summary of all the competitive information, and that is a Gartner Magic Square, it's called. And so here's an example of a magic square. You pick just two benefits. And usually these are not yes or no benefits. These are best done as a continuum. So here we have low tech and low cost, or low tech, high tech, and low cost, high cost. And in this presentation, your company has to be in the upper right corner. Again, there's no reason for that except that's the convention. Up and to the right is simply thought of as the best place. So you put your company there and pick 2 benefits so that your company would land in the upper right corner when weighed on those 2 benefits. And then you take the rest of your competition and you plot them out in the various spaces in this graph. And what you find is that often there are clusters in your competitors. In this case, in the lower left corner are the named competition, and then there's kind of a continuum of those technologies that in the previous one were lumped in as other R&D solutions, but here are displayed in this 2-dimensional matrix. And the benefit of doing it this way is that you can kind of show the landscape of where the competitors lie. It's really interesting if you pick the right benefits so that you have customers in all 3 quadrants and you stand alone in the 4th quadrant. That's one way to show off something. Or you might have a second customer or a second competitor sitting near you in that quadrant, but then you can talk about how you're different from them as part of the story. And again, the way you summarize and talk about this is 2 or 3 little stories that explain why the upper right-hand corner is the best in this case, and why all the other competition has overlooked that fact and why they lie in the farthest reaches from that corner.